Hi, Chris. Welcome to Business Insider. And we've seen part of your energy already. Now I just need to recreate.
Okay.
This is for business people to see how they can make a difference, I guess not only in their lives and their businesses, but and look at the broader perspective in the community as well. And who better, because you've been dabbling in politics for 20 years now, hey?
Well, if local government's dabbling, it seems to have been a full-time commitment, but at the same time, my family has expanded our businesses from my background was Woolworths management, my wife was bank employee. When we decided to leave Woolworths for personal reasons with family health, parents and that, we came back and set up small business. Well, we've grown that from one business and been a number of businesses and different businesses we've been involved in. Currently, my wife and family have an involvement in 6 odd shops down on the Woy Woy Peninsula, which is all under a certain theme, but very different from what we started at. So.
Okay. Looking back, you responded to health issues in the family and you made a decision to come back and be closer to the family, is that?
Yeah, well, Woolworths was a very demanding company in that as a manager with a young family, we had to move to various places. I was a trading manager. My job was to get in there and build up sales, to market, promote within the store the best way to increase sales. So I was moved on a constant basis. With those health issues, we decided to come back home, get into our own small business, to be closer to mum and dad and the in-laws, to look and assist them, but also to bring my family back to an area that I just loved. It was the Central Coast.
And then council came up as an option.
Well, circumstances took me and got me involved in having a few things to say about local politics. We purchased a house on our returning to Gosford of what we could afford at that stage. It was in a floodplain, or on the fringe of a floodplain as we thought at that stage. Ultimately we found out one night when the water came through the house that it was in the middle of the floodplain. Council's opinion was that, well, that's just bad luck, that's what you do. And we started with a community group to lobby both council, state and federal to address issues of flooding within the Narara Valley. That in turn meant inappropriate development, grants and funds needed to assist flood mitigation works. I got challenged on one of the nights that I spoke in council on behalf of the community. Well, if you think you can do any better, you stand.
And that's what it took.
Well, I don't know if you believe in horoscopes, but I'm a Taurus the bull. So you wave a red flag, I charge. So how do you do that? Well, how do you stand for council? What's involved? Well, we found out. Stood for council in 1991, sold the old van that we were running the kids around at that stage, raised $1,500 and ran a campaign and stood for council. And I have now been there, it'll be just on 20 years this September. I've served, I think the record number of terms as a mayor, 6 year terms as mayor. I've been re-elected on 5 occasions with an increased vote at every occasion, and I have found that even today I learn more every day about what's involved in local government, politics, council, and serving the community. And whilst it's been I must say, a financial burden because it doesn't give you a return, it's been one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done.
What's looking forward now? You have the potential to going to the state level. Is there something you look at there and say, this is what I want to do? This. Forget the parties now, but this is what Chris Holstein wants to do.
Look, there's a lot of projects that I can see need to get done locally, and they will be my objectives there. But one of the greatest things I think to do if I'm looking, go up in a helicopter, as we would say, and look at a broad approach, is getting a greater interaction between the council and the state government. Local government only exists because the state government have an act that means local government's there. Federal government don't even recognise. We're not part of the Constitution. So there's not a lot really the federal sphere, but on the state sphere, we are a necessity. We are serving the community. We constantly are the recipient of many state laws, bylaws, regulations and rules that we have to enforce for them. Some not popular, but there has to be a greater commitment of connectivity between the two levels to get the best result for the people.
You had the opportunity, and you didn't have the opportunity, but you forced the opportunity to spend a significant amount of money on surf lifesaving clubs, which was...
I did. In my first, I served 4 terms as mayor between 97 and 2001, and one of the projects that we actually put together then was the need to rebuild our surf clubs. Our surf clubs are at the forefront of the elements. They get damaged, the wear and tear is significant on them.
Why was it difficult though, Chris? I like the story.
The difficulty is that there is limited dollars of grant funding that you can get through either federal or state to improve these facilities. But we saw the need for these facilities to be upgraded because they were virtually a surf club's a community centre. It's where people will come together, not just for the surf club, but there's meetings of the local neighbourhood watch, the local progress associations. The mothers clubs would use the wood where the facilities existed, the opportunity to have the grandma's 80th birthday party or the wedding anniversary or those things. So we came up with a strategy that said, look, if we're going to rebuild our surf clubs, we've got to do several things. It's not going to be done overnight. It's a 10-year program. It will exceed costs of 15 plus million. You're going to have to go to the community to get a levy to increase your rates so that you can be part of this. It means everybody contributed to it. And then the strategy also involved the fact that you needed to say, well, hang on, another 15 years down the track, the surf clubs have worn out again because of the elements, the wear, the tear, the sun, the surf, the salt. What are you then going to do? So what we talked about was the ability for these surf clubs to, in running those functions, having those meetings, getting a return, not at an unrealistic rate, but, being able to hire their halls, their facilities for those functions, to get money back that would go into a building fund that would ensure the future of the club would not be a burden on the ratepayer in providing what was their essential service as being a home for our surf life saving movement, a home for our paid lifeguards to do what they need to do to protect our beaches.
So that was big planning.
It was massive planning, and what are you talking about when you talk about protecting our beaches? You're talking about 2 million visitors a year to the beaches here. They're not all locals, and that will kill your tourism industry if you start losing people off your beaches, drownings and those things. So we had a need to ensure that we maintain these clubs, how we were going to rebuild them, and then how you were going to maintain them beyond that.
Okay. The point that I want to get, and you've developed it well, is that local government is moving in its vision, and you pushed it to think 10 years out. How do you have a stake in the ground that says, okay, once Holstein's finished in state government, this is what they're going to say? Because I from a business planning point of view, want to move everyone, whether it be government, whether it be the local businesses, if it be chambers, whatever. They've got to put some accountability on the table. Do you see anything in your future that kind of says, okay, this is my legacy at that state level?
I look at it at different levels. I have short-term objectives of things that need to be addressed immediately. There will then be long-term objectives which might take the 5 or the 10 years. So there may be things I put in place that if I'm not re-elected, I've got to win the first one first, but if I'm not re-elected, I've set things in motion that have made a difference in my community. And I suppose at the end of the day, if you really go beyond that, have you succeeded? Well, mate, when you're dead and buried, somebody says, well, did he make a difference? Did I leave some legacy or leave something?
Place?
Is it a better place? Look, if I pass away now, heaven forbid I walk out of here and get hit by a truck. I know I've got the surf club rebuilding program done, dusted, 8 new surf clubs. I know that we did the hard yards and built the Blue Tongue Stadium. I knew we got the Peninsula Leisure Centre and $25 million worth of an aquatic centre up. I know Caroline Bay and our arts facility out there is not the all and end all, but it's the start that can be built on by those that follow me. And if anything I leave, I want to leave some encouragement for people to say, you can make a difference. You really can. You don't have to be a billionaire, a millionaire. You don't have to be the Prime Minister. Anybody can make a difference in their community. And with your business, as I was saying, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're right. You've got to be positive. But if you don't put the planning in place, that's what really gets me. It's the people who have say, well, we're going to go that, we're going to have this objective, go there, that's where we're going. You don't have a plan in place to get there. And that's so important in business.
And so sad
really
to see
is.
when they don't. Okay, we're going to give you the soapbox for 60 seconds now.
Right,
It's not telling a politician it's not a political moment.
politicians get paid, mate. I'm a local councillor.
You are
I'm
at this
trying
stage.
to be a politician.
You're trying to. Okay.
I'm a councillor that get a.
Tell me
gets a
what
small
does
allowance.
that? Does the fact that we don't respect our local councillors enough to pay them a reasonable amount of money? Does that get? Is that a moment for your rant on your soapbox, or what?
I suppose the rant on the soapbox would be for me, and it really comes back to because small business has been since I left Woolworths, has been the heart and soul. I've had a corner store, we've had a takeaway, an industrial estate, a florist. Now I don't look like a man who'd be a florist. Let me tell you,
Be careful.
I can do a very good flower arrangement. We've gone from back to cafes, new age shops, therapy centres, different retail outlets with my wife and my family, and I've had a say in those while they're her businesses, so I can focus on my political dealings and my community work with council. I suppose the one thing I see in small business, because I see that being more important than the big businesses. Small businesses, it's the heart and soul of your economy locally. And I suppose if I wanted to rant for 60 seconds, governments need to be looking more at the red tape, at the bureaucracy that impedes small business. There are facts and figures out there now that say a small businessman needs to take 10 to 20 hours a week just to meet his obligations. Obligations at a local, state and a federal level. The red tape needs to be cut. Businesses need to be able to be more efficient.
Done? Seriously?
Yeah, it can.
And when you think about it, I don't have a problem with 20 hours a week. I'm a small business. I don't have a problem. I farm out the stuff. If he wants to do it all, or she wants to do it all herself, you got to do it. But you get bookkeepers, you get the other people.
And it comes at a cost of running your business
and
too.
My biggest issue though, Chris, is we go into business thinking we can do it all ourselves.
Oh, do we what?
And that's a problem because, and we've got people like the BiUC who are there to say business planning is important. Those sort of people, I'm just wondering, and I understand red tape, it's such an easy thing to say, and I don't mean to be offensive, but it is an easy thing to say, but it's also indicative of people who don't plan, who think, okay, well, I'm not going to have to do it. We opened a couple of coffee shops. We had a similar history. Yeah, I love health inspectors coming at unannounced, and they will find stuff that needs to be done. That's part of the business. Yep. Do we do enough? Is there enough understanding? Do we need to do more for business people to say you actually can't do it all?
We talk about the business people planning, then I believe the government need to plan too. The governments and bureaucrats that make decisions to say that these are now the rules and regulations and you're going to do this and you're going to do that, have they actually worked in a small business? Do they know what the impediment is for them? Have they planned in saying, well, for me to put a new legislation in for a small business, what does that mean? What will that cost that business? Will that be the straw that broke the camel's back? Now, in speaking with the Shadow Minister for Small Business, Don Page, we've talked about ways and great initiatives of saying, well, if you're going to bring forward more legislation, it's a 2-for-1. Rightio? If I'm going to bring one piece of legislation forward, you take two away. Yeah. You make it more efficient and more effective.
I think the other parties also suggested that too.
Said it, but it's about implementing it. Yeah. Don't think there weren't people talking about surf clubs before we made the move. Yeah. Don't think there weren't people talking about building Blue Tongue Stadium before we actually did it. Rightio? What is it? You can walk. You can talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk. Yeah. And that's what you have to do in small business too. If you've got to get all your acts together, you've got to get your planning together, then you've got to implement it. Planning's no good if it's gathering dust on the shelf.
And back to, I guess I have a barrow to push because of my passion for the BiUC. Does government give enough in that developmental area that raising businesses from embryonic to employers?
There are a lot of good initiatives out there. There could always be more. It's about a greater understanding and a greater, just don't give the money and lose it. I don't think sometimes we're accountable as politicians. If we give funding towards something, we've got to then benchmark it. We've got to, did we achieve the KPIs? Did we get the results? And make decisions that sometimes decisions always aren't easy ones, right? But they've got to get an outcome from the decision.
I think that's a massive,
politics at times, we'll throw money at it. don't you feel warm and fuzzy? Wasn't that great? And look at some of the programs we've had during the economic financial crisis, the world financial crisis. I think some of those things had to happen. I think they could have been better planned.
Is that accountability happening at local level for funds? Because I'm an advocate for that, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
and how can we encourage it? As business people, we should be encouraging it
well,
too, shouldn't it? The
and maybe
council-
I'm biased because as a council, I feel we're always under the pump for accountability. We have limitations. You know, we just can't spend willy-nilly. We have to meet criteria. We are raising of our funds, which is basically 30% of the funds that council raises through rates. Now, the rest is through grants and that come from the other levels of government. So your rates are pegged. So if you have initiatives, such as we did with the Surf Club, I had to put a proposal back, not just to my councillors, not just to my community, but to the state government to tick off on it as well. So that relationship between the levels of government, which is an objective I have, of improving that relationship, improving that trust, that faith, and with good planning, there's an outcome we got for our community.
Yeah. We talk about the region of the Central Coast. We have 2 local governments here.
Yep.
How quickly can we change to a regional government here? Should we change to a regional government?
Look, providing it costs us no more, then why wouldn't you? But the fact is that my experience tells me that you might well diminish some of the top management. You might have 1 general manager rather than 2, but you'd be talking about an area of 2,000 square kilometres. You'd be talking of a staffing of over 2,000 people. You'd be talking a responsibility that you would probably need to have an assistant anyway to that general manager of senior level. You wouldn't have any less people mowing the lawns, less people filling the potholes. You wouldn't have any less workers out there, or less trucks or less vehicles. You wouldn't have less depots because you've still got to man and service those areas. Can you imagine saying, well, we'll all bring it back to one works depot? It'd take them 3 hours to get to the extremities of the area. Yeah. So the changes that could be made that would save money would be things like joint purchase, resource share. Well, we do those things now. When we can, we work in with Wyong to purchase product. When we can, we share vehicles and resources.
When, again, from
it's
a business...
the need comes up.
Do we have an understanding between the 2 governments to say, okay, well, this will be the... Because you've got Michael now at Wyong, and Peter is an enthusiast for...
and you've got... you'll change mayors constantly. If anything stuffs the system up at times, it can be the politics. And that's usually the elected representatives that will have their issues with another council area where they're going. And there's egos involved in everything. But I believe on the Central Coast here, we have a far greater ability to work in closely together. We've done that through tourism. We have our hiccups at times, but we've done that through the water. Look at the projects that's needed to give us our water security for the future, the Marty to Mangrove pipeline link. I go back to 2006. Brenton Pavia and myself raised this issue prior to a state election. The federal government, Jim Lloyd, took on that initiative then after. He got it, to his credit, Kevin Rudd, and the new federal member backed it up, gave us 80 million. But that was a project across 2 councils, but that was cooperation with it.
I just have the logic screams that, there will be. I went to the presentation I think you attended to with the school kids, and
some logic will also tell you that we are over government, and why have we got state?
Yeah, well, because they look after local government.
Well, maybe you make the local government bigger and don't have the state. These are all the arguments.
That may be a change you can do.
As long as they are working effectively and efficiently together to provide the source, and we minimise the waste, and we give effective services to the people. I do believe that local government is more efficient than anybody else at any level of government of doing that.
One target for your potential new electorate?
One target
what do they
for
want to hear from you? What are they going? Yes, I've got to vote for Chris.
What are they going to hear from me? I think what's happened in the last few years is about accountability. We've sat there mortified as we watched the sale of the electricity, and to see that what started at 25 billion is now gone down to 5 billion, and now we're finding figures of, well, it's only going to be worth 2.3 billion. Government needs to be accountable. And sometimes we tend to lose, as politicians, lose sight of being accountable. They get full of their own self-importance. Being brought back to earth, I think, is very important. I've learnt that over my 20 years, because what brings me back to earth is my family, is getting out there and talking to the people. If you lose sight of that, if you lose contact with the average Joe on the street and your family, then you lose sight of what's real in the community. I think a lot of politicians do that. Governments lose their way. I think this government's lost their way. They're not being held they're not accountable. They've gone off on a tangent that the people don't want, and we've got to come back to a bit more grassroots.
Are the people ready to pay more? If they want, my contention with power and water is that we as consumers have said we don't want to pay any more. So the government said, okay, if they don't want to pay any more, we won't invest anymore. And this is my hypothesis is we are here because as consumers we have forced the government to say they're not going to invest. So does the government need to be stronger?
What did I say? The government needs to make the hard decisions. One of the hard decisions in regard to the electricity at the moment is, well, we need to sell it because we need to get all this infrastructure. My question is, we've had, for the last 16 years, there has been an income from the electricity of about $15 billion. Where's it gone?
Yeah.
It hasn't gone back into maintaining. When you set up your business and you need as a coffee shop to have certain pieces of equipment, you know that they have a limited life. You need to put aside to be able to reinvest into renew the coffee machine, renew the fridges, put better tables and chairs out at the coffee, and you need to be able to invest. You manage it. We've had a government that hasn't managed the electricity, so we're now coming back and paying for what should have been done.
Absolutely.
Or should have been managed better.
We need more Surf Life Saving Club program, and this is not a flippant comment. That program outlined by you can be self-sustaining, provided the funds are managed well.
Self-sustaining, but to a point that it may not be totally self-sustaining to level if a storm took the whole surf club out, but would give us to a point that lessens the burden for the future ratepayers and don't have to be constantly forking out every 5 or 10 or 15 years for major redevelopment of their surf club. They know those clubs will be able to hold their own now for far greater length of time while still being able to provide a service because we've managed, we've planned, and we've put a strategy in place that we're going to constantly follow through on.
That's a great way to finish up. Chris, when it comes to getting business activated and your passion for making things happen, is it individual businesses or do you see the role of local chambers, for instance? There's an obligation there almost on them to activate and galvanise the businesses into developing and moving forward?
I think it's all of them. And you can look at what are the problems where we don't get that type of activism happening. For a lot of cases, it came back to, again, small businesses, about them finding the time and the efforts. If you're a small business person, and we talked about how much time they spend on the bureaucracy, well, if you could say, well, I'll make that a bit less, but then I want you to come along to your Chamber Commerce meeting every month for a couple of hours. Yeah. Then if you've got that little bit of time spare to do that, to find out and to network with all the other businesses out there, because guess what? There's other businesses you would never thought of that may well have some link that's going to enhance your business or in turn you enhance theirs. Right, so it's it really comes down to the level where the businesses have got to be prepared to put in the time and the effort because they are what the Chamber's about. The Chamber is about having that membership. Sometimes you get, unfortunately too, when you come to the Chamber level, some of them get hijacked at times into focusing purely on certain aspects of business within their community.
Can I ask,
rather than being more broad spread?
Yeah. See, we allow, as Chamber members, we allow that to happen.
Yes.
Hijacks, for me, are a takeover with the permission of other members. Not an active permission. It's because they just sit back and say, no, that's okay, he can run away with that.
Apathy rules.
Apathy rules.
Yeah.
And that's the change. How do you... Because that's what makes small business, is because in a lot of ways, they're so insular, they can't break out and they can't make the time. Well, and then they get railroaded.
Well, don't ever let yourself and small business get railroaded. If your chamber allows you to have an active say and a contribution into what happens in your area, then you will continue to be a member. You'll get stuck into it and you'll have a role to play there. Don't let yourself get railroaded. No. But before that, get yourself motivated, get yourself planned and organised so that you can be part of it. and then take it from there. And then the chambers, from a council perspective, what I need of the chambers is for the chambers to be regularly meeting. When I was mayor, we would have a regular meeting with the chambers. Some chambers wouldn't meet with me. That's fine. Others would, and we'd have a regular sit-down session. What's happening in the area? And they were able to feed that back to their members. Now their membership grew and were more proactive, while the other one felt that they were left out. They were left out because they wanted to be left out.
They chose.
That was their choice. But you need to be communicating across from your members, to your chamber, to your councils, and from your councils to the state. And I think we've gone over that one. I need that area to be improved. But that'll break down, and it'll break down in the areas you go down when you don't have that communication.
Does council have a mandate or a philosophy about encouraging that? You tried to do it when you were mayor. Does it happen? You've got development officers and managers.
Yeah.
And I've been to meetings where Mr. Tilson has come to those meetings and he's heavily involved. But they've got to be invited, I guess, or...
Yes, and I was always told when I got into local government, don't go where you're not invited. Well, sometimes I've broken that rule. I've wanted it anyway, say, well, I've got an opinion. You can take it. This is my thoughts. I'm there to help. If I can, I can.
But you've got a voice, and now I'm putting words in my mouth. If small business doesn't have a voice, they say what everyone else says. Yeah. They've got to have a voice. They've got to stand up. They've got a plan, and they've got to have some passion.
And they've got to talk to their chamber, and they've got to be actively involved in their chamber. If they don't do that, then don't come back and bitch and whinge and grizzle that this didn't happen, unless you have a say. You're not going to win every time, and that's the other thing with small businesses and certain egos of individuals. I want all this, and if this doesn't happen, then it's all, I'm
out of here.
Yeah, mate, that's all shit disaster. It didn't happen. You win some, you lose some, but if you're being heard all the way, you know you're making a difference. And as I say to people, look, at least give me the information. I will then formulate what I think that needs to be done there in my other role and other responsibilities, and you'll take all of their thoughts and ideas on board. And it may not be exactly what they want, but geez, we seem to live in an intolerant society now that we can't take compromise.
And we don't listen and we don't talk. Yeah, we expect...
I talk too much sometimes.
We might stop there.